First, real quick with the chalk again, on your back pockets as appropriate, mark where the dart is on the pocket. To prepare the curtain, iron it in half, outside on the outside. The curtains go underneath the slanted pocket bag and over the back pockets. We chalked the darts so you know where you'll put in some pleats. Start basting it on underneath the slanted pocket, moving towards the back, basting it to the seam allowance of the waistband. We might not want to remove this baste, so you might want to make sure it's secure and doesn't go through the waistband fabric for all to see. Or you could baste it and then cross stitch it too. I'll leave that to you to decide. When you get to the dart, make a pleat that opens towards the back. Only a couple of centimeters deep will do. Always easiest on a ham, we can iron it to make a nice clean pleat. To make the double or box pleat at the centre back of the trouser, you want to make the pleats only as wide as the inlay, facing inwards towards each other, opening on the inside. Iron it and continue basting, making sure to include a fourth pleat at the other dart, and finishing under the other slanted pocket bag. Trim away the curtain so that it fits under the pocket as well. We already ironed the silecia under itself 1 centimeter, so now we can baste it to the inlay and the curtain as well. This might be easier if we put it over a sleeve board. We need them to lay naturally together so that the pocket won't pull on the inlay or bunch up when it's attached. Once you've got them sitting together, baste the silecia up the inlay. When we get to the curtain, we'll baste the pocket to the curtain and the inlay, but we'll avoid basting through the trouser because that'll just make felling it later more troublesome. From under the forward side of the slanted pocket, on the fly guard side, place some curtain under there. As we baste it, if there's enough space, we might include a pleat. Still facing towards the back, but it is very case by case, depending on how big the person is. This time, we can do without. Secure it a little beyond the seam holding the guard. Usually, I'd want to move the pocket bag out of the way and only baste the waistband seam allowance, just FYI. Upon getting the curtain under the front sides of our front pockets, we need to baste the top of the pocket to the curtain for filling later. Only between the curtain and the pocket, still don't catch the rest of the trouser. I'm going to set the bearer now. I'm cutting away the excess beyond the line we chalked so that we have a healthy seam allowance so that we can cover our seam. Snipping in at the curve so that I can unfold it in a curve. Make sure there's enough ease and the silecia won't pull on the bearer when we connect it to the seam allowance. Fold and iron the silecia on the chalk line such that it will hide the undesirable seam from view. And again with the ham, or lack there fucking of. Since I didn't overlock it, I can trim off loose threads on the seam allowance before basting the silecia to said seam allowance. Ideally, only to the seam allowance, that way it'll be easiest to finish later. When we hit the curtain, basting it to the curtain. For the fly side, fold the end of the curtain inwards 1 centimeter so that there aren't raw edges on what will be an exposed edge. Baste it to the fly, I suggest so that it's lined up with the edge of the 5mm of the fly's silecia on the side nearer the center front. If the distance between the fly and the pocket is small, then again we don't need a pleat. Baste it to the seam allowance and then baste it to the pocket. For finishing the fly and the guard, fold back the waistband such that it is flush with the trouser below it, and iron a crease there so that you know where that is. Unless you want an extended waistband, then choose how much extra you want beyond the center front, which is the norm with side adjusters, so that there's 2 hooks, both sharing the increased strain. You may want to trim away the canvas. You'll need to unpick a bit of the top and possibly the bottom, depending on your exact method. We could elect to fold it back with the canvas, but that only has any benefit on the fly side. We will fold back and secure the waistband in the same way as we did the center back. Force it down from the top slightly so that we can hide the raw edge underneath the waistband lining. Tack them on the bottom and the top and fill the raw edge to the waistband so that there's no gaping at all. Trim the inlays, layering them a bit again, and fold the waistband on top of the inlays and raw edges. No, on top. On top! No, you fucking idiot! Tack them and fill them along the folded bit, except you may not be able to do that on the guard side. Fold it up slightly to the bottom and get that secure. We'll almost always have more leftover waistband on the fly side. We can just cut away the excess so that we have at least 2 or 3 centimeters to fold back. I could literally replay the voiceover. Cut down and layer the inlay and fold our excess waistband on top of it, fixing it down in the same way. Yeah, hook comes under lining, I decided. Depending on the exact type of hook and bar you have will dictate the method of attachment. But with this simple normal one, you need to begin by cutting a strip from your leftover curtain to loop through the hook, which will hold the end of the waistband in a curve. When attaching it, be sure that the hook is on top of the folded back front fabric. Place it a little closer than half a centimetre from the front edge, but not too far either. Otherwise it's too visible from the outside. To secure it, you will be best using doubled up silk thread because it needs to be really strong. Like I mentioned earlier, if you want to fold back the canvas, we can attach the hook before we fold it back. It's much easier that way, I think. For the same reason, you want to be sure to catch the canvas. Start with one of the front holes and go through that one a few times. Moving on to the other, go under the fabric so that there isn't 2 centimeters of thread exposed, then moving back to the last one, securing it either side thoroughly. When the hook is set in place, use the strip that you attached and pull on it slightly enough to curve the end of the band. Attach it there to the waistband canvas. We don't need to tack it too far, maybe 2 or 3 centimeters from the hook. It doesn't need to be pretty, but it does need to be secure and not visible from the outside of the waistband. We can trim off any excess silecia beyond where we tacked it. When you attach the bar, you need the exact position of where it needs to go to couple with the hook. Do up the zip, make sure the waistbands line up. Chalk both sides of the hook and the vertical tip of it too. We need to make holes just inside of our vertical chalk marks though, because we marked the top of the hook, not where we'd like the bar to sit. Now there's this thing called an awl or a bodkin, and much the same as zip feet, I don't have one. It's used for making holes in fabric without cutting or breaking it, rather just moving fibers out of the way. In lieu of said tool, we'll have to improvise, easing into it with progressively larger instruments, beginning with a basting needle or the largest needle that you have. Could use a nail. Make the first hole and stick the bar through it. Not the easiest unless your hole is big enough. We can put the bar somewhere and hold it upright and or steady and pull the trouser hole down into it. We might need to use our awl to push the cloth or the canvas fibers a little from either side from the inside in order to get the widest point through. The second side is more of a challenge, and you need to do some acrobatics to get it in there. We need to make the second hole and force the bar further into the first hole before we force it into the second. Do check when you get it in place that it's in the right place on both the vertical and the horizontal plane. Use the same thread you used for the hook, sew the bar through both holes to the canvas, still importantly not catching through to the outside fabric. There are no-sew hooks and bars that you stab through the fabric and then bend the prongs into a secure position. That will basically go on in the same way. Again, we should have done this earlier with the other one, but we're cutting down and layering the seam allowances a little bit. Also, we're giving the bearer its function. I'm cutting the seam allowances from the fly guard down to the waistline. I'm making the cuts about 2 centimeters apart around the middle of the bearer. On the outside of the bearer, on the waistband seam, chalk either side of where you cut so that we know where we can make a buttonhole later. And back to actually lining the trouser. The waistband lining needs to be turned inwards 1 centimeter all the way up and down. Mark, or don't bother, the centimeter across the top and bottom and iron it. Turn in 1 centimeter on one side so that we can stick into the hook. We can put the lining in one piece or two. If you want 2 pieces, then cut them the same length as the waistband. The lining has to be tight into the hook. Push the folded edge into the hook and begin to baste a few centimeters before the hook on the lower side of the waistband, basting up towards the hook. When you get under the hook is when we make sure they're cozied up together, unfolding the seam allowance a little bit if we need to, moving the baste to the top of the waistband and basting on the lining. Given we don't want it to show, leave a few centimeters above the lining to the top of the waistband. And as you're basting, build in some ease, ensuring that it won't be tight and pull against itself. Hence, make sure it's rolled over your hands. The excess only needs to be as much inlay as there is on the waistband. Any more is just useless. Keep the lining going to the opposite side's inlay. Fold it back to the center back, then back again along the waistband. If it was 2 pieces, cut the current waistband flush with the inlay on the opposite trouser. With the other piece of waistband, fold the same amount of lining underneath itself. Line it up to the center back before beginning to baste it towards the bar to under the guard. When we get to the fly guard seam, we'll usually baste the waistband lining underneath the bearer's silecia. Angle the lining to lower its top edge as we get past it so that we don't have to think about it showing. That's the complicated bit. Just baste along the bottom edge back to where we started. Nice and easy. We're going to baste the guard's silecia down. We should start from where we unpicked the thread to get the waistband on, firstly clearing out any loose machine threads. We need to fold the silecia along the top inwards, cutting some of it away so that we might only have 1 centimeter to fold down. We can just baste them, or we can iron them beforehand. Baste it across towards the waistband, trying to keep the height level with the waistband lining. We're going to set the bottom of the fly bearer now. Do up the zip and such to position the two comfortably together. Fold and iron the silecia that extends beyond the fly together. Cut away any excess silecia slightly beyond where the fly and bearer ends to the effect of being able to fold them under the fly. Baste it down and make sure it looks alright.